Welcome to Living in Connection, where we explore the nature of physical and non-physical reality and what that means in your life.
Well, hello again. I am Dirk Dunning.
And I'm Frank DeMarco. And today, just to be different, we thought we would talk about sin. And we don't mean our own biographies, or possibly we should. But it's actually a serious subject, and the guys have talked about it quite a bit. And I thought I would like to give you their perspective on what this all means. Because, as you know, many people think sin is connected with God and is connected with judgment. And God is some spiritual judge there who's going to say, you did this wrong, yeah, I'm going to punish you. And that isn't the way the guys see it at all. However, what many people experience as God might also be experienced as the non-3D, as experienced through our 3D lives. And it might look the same way, relatively omniscient, relatively all-powerful. Carl Jung said that, by the way, about the racial unconscious. He thought that that might be what people were experiencing and calling it God. But I think what I would like to do is talk about sin and a particular definition of sin, which some people have, which is missing the mark, which I like very much. It isn't you were told not to do this and you did it anyway, we're going to punish you. It's if you want to go the way you're going, that's not the way to get there. You all right with that, Doctor?
Sure.
Okay. They said at one point, sin is always an easy descent and virtue always requires a decision. And they were talking in the context of the 7 deadly sins and the 7 virtues. And I doubt if many people today even know what those are. But I think at some point we'll talk about that. Also, I'm coming from a background where I was raised Catholic, and I was Catholic for most of my teen years. And so they had concepts that I think are appropriate, but perhaps we're understanding them quite a bit differently. Mortal sin versus a venial sin. What I think that means is a venial sin is something where you just went off the mark sort of accidentally, and who cares, you'll get back. But a mortal sin is you decided to go that way and you to continue going that way. We'll see. Okay. Hard to see. Shall we start with the 7 deadly sins, what they are?
Go for it.
All right. I had to, years ago when I first started to investigate this, I had to make up an acronym. So I made up leg caps. And then because the last one is either ennui or sloth, it's the same one, but under different terms. So it's either leg caps or leg cape, but it works. It's the only acronym I could make, by the way, out of those 7 letters. So that would be lust, envy, gluttony, covetousness, anger, pride, and then again, either sloth or ennui. And I don't know, I've thought about it. I can't think of any other ways in which people can miss the mark that isn't one of those or a combination of one of those. And by the way, theologically, they say pride is the first one. And my suspicion is that means the ego level self determining that it's the be all and end all, and it's not going to listen to input from its higher self. Well, I want to guess. The 7 cardinal virtues, the first 4 were taken from the Romans, and they weren't at all anything I expected. Prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude. And you can hear those are, very strong, solid virtues. The Christians, for 2 reasons. One, because classical civilization said 7 was the right number, they added 3 more. But also because it made sense in their theology, which is faith, hope, and charity. Okay. So now what does all that mean to us living our lives? Here's the way I look at it. We, as you know, have to go one moment at a time, and every moment seems like the only real moment. Everything else is only theoretical, or else it's past, or else it's future. But people who have been beyond say that actually we take all the paths. That is like a CD-ROM containing a game. All possible paths are there from the time that disc is made, and you can only experience one level at a time according to your choices. If that's true, the how should we say this? The social aspects of these sins sort of cancels out, it seems to me. Because if all paths are good and all paths are taken, even if you're making a mistake, it's got to be a mistake. I say this definitely, but it's really more tentatively than it sounds. It seems to me if we make a mistake, the main impact of that mistake has to be ourselves rather than what it does to the outside world. Now, at this point, I want to stop and see if the guys have something to say, but perhaps your guys have something to say first. Yes, no?
Well, actually,
Or you.
so for me, the word sin has always been one I have struggled with, not in the usual sense of the word, but I struggle with it because sin is only defined within religious contexts, and lacking those contexts, for me, sin is a contextless word. It's empty. It lexically has no meaning. Now, that doesn't imply anything about the underlying things that are usually put into that word, as you just went through. Those all do have meaning, but the word sin itself has none.
And if you take sin as being missing the mark, I forget which language that was in. It's an ancient one. It's not modern, but if you took it as that, it would have context, I take it. For you, I mean.
I can have it, it wouldn't give sin context, but having that phrase as context applied to other things, absolutely.
Okay,
Yes.
that's yeah. Well, words are always a problem. You know, they make intangible things seem real, and they make real things seem intangible.
And the other one is like when on the virtues, I would have a different list, though I've never really thought about it to write them down. And very high on that list is, the hope, charity, kindness kinds of things, but also very high on the list is responsibility.
Well,
And that's
let's
one
see.
that's usually omitted from all lists.
Let me see here. Temperance. So because I'm going to forget them if I don't do this. Temperance, justice, fortitude. What's the other one? Prudence. Okay, and what's the one you just mentioned?
Responsibility.
Would responsibility come under any of those?
Not really in the way that I understand it.
Okay, let's talk about yours.
So the easiest way to think about mine would be to go read the things that Admiral Rickover has written about responsibility. And he's very clear about it, and it's a very particular view. And it's the same view that I think my dad had that I was raised with about being responsible. And that once you are responsible, you can't give it away, you can't give it up, you are always responsible.
Now tell us,
You end up
say that
having
again. Say that in different words. And
well,
then
let me use the context like of nuclear safety. That
okay.
If you go through the various work that's required, that you end up being in a responsible position for safeguarding a reactor. And there,
Yes.
1,000 other things are like this. Say that you're safeguarding people, you're a police officer, and your job is to protect people. You have a responsibility to them. Once you've taken that on, you can't give it to someone else. Or even if you do give it to someone else, you still haven't given anything away. You are still responsible. You maintain that essentially forever.
Well, I mean, supposing you retire and you're no longer employed, in what way are you still responsible?
You're still responsible to a degree. You no longer have the capability to act. But if you see something go wrong, you have an obligation to ensure that those who are now in the active role are aware of it.
I
to
think you're
ensure
saying
that it's taken care of.
I think you're saying you can't just step away and say, "Well, not my problem." Is that?
Exactly.
Oh, all right, okay.
Exactly.
Well, now is that a virtue or is that a life path? I don't know why it's not a
I don't know
virtue.
what name to give it. For me,
Yeah.
it's core, whatever it is.
Hmm. Well, Rita asked me once about my beliefs, and I said, "Well, you don't hurt people." And I just said it like that because it's the way I feel. And she said, "Well, most people wouldn't say that. They would say, well, you don't hurt people unless they do such and such, but that wasn't the way I feel. I felt it was an absolute,
No.
You probably
And I
can't
feel
help,
just like you.
yeah, you probably can't help
The
hurting
one,
people.
right. Exactly. The third one that I would add to that, or another one that I would add to it is, and it's one that I've said sometimes that catches people off guard. I live my life in service.
I agree with that. Now, how's that
And it's
different
one
from
of,
responsibility?
it's a different aspect than responsibility, because responsibility, you have an onus to do things. In service, the onus isn't there. You're doing things of benefit because it's the right thing to do, but it's not an obligation by any means.
All right. Now, you see, to me, those are two different aspects. One is in terms of you versus society, but the primary one is you versus yourself, and not versus, but vis-a-vis
Mhm.
yourself. And yes, I
Yeah,
would agree. You don't make excuses to yourself for why you're doing what you know you shouldn't be doing, or vice versa.
yeah, and you
Yeah,
can't.
right. Well, you
By
can if you keep
definition,
your
you
eyes
can't.
shut enough. Yeah. Well, let's stay with the seven virtues that we inherited from the Romans and then from the churches: justice, prudence, temperance, fortitude. There's none of those that I would. I mean, they surprised me the first time I read them because I expected something a little more pietistic, but I thought no, these are absolutely um, desirable characteristics, and they're characteristics that you
Mhm.
don't just walk into. You really have to decide to be them. I think.
You must choose.
And the
Yes.
guys have said that with sins, it's easy to slide into them. So it's like lust or envy or anger or anything. It's easy to slide into them, and then you may have to argue with your own nature as to whether you're going to continue to slide or you're going to climb back up. But these, you don't slide into fortitude or temperance or prudence or justice. You have to make a decision. This is who I am. This is what I'm going to be. And it seems to me
Or
that
humility.
humility, yes, and they don't have that in that. Now that's interesting. That is not one of them, but I would put that up there actually. Humility,
Mhm.
integrity, responsibility. Well, let's make our own list with that, Dirk, while we're at it. Humility, integrity, responsibility.
Kindness.
Um, although, when you said kindness, it reminds me now we're getting to sort of the Buddhist thing of non-harm or not. What do they call it? It means
It's a
kindness.
soft version here.
Yeah, yeah, but all right, but kindness for sure. Um, did we say honesty? Yes, we did. That's the first one.
Honesty. Yep.
Honesty, integrity, responsibility, kindness.
I had service, but it's funny. Responsibility kind of for me is top tier. Service comes next. Kindness, even though kindness is critically important, it is under those, and it's not because one's superior to the other. They have different aspects to them.
Yeah, I don't know I can't see any particular advantage in prioritizing them. I mean, people
Mhm.
say the other virtues and they say them in a certain order, but it isn't meant to be, this one is the most important, I don't think. Well,
And the way I'm ordering them is more like it's more like a distinction from hard to soft than it is top to bottom or first to last.
the one that I don't hear here yet, and maybe it doesn't
What's that?
belong as a virtue, but I think it does, and that's consciousness.
Consciousness or conscientiousness?
Well, conscientiousness seems to me to be I will do what I have committed to do, or I will do
Right.
what I know I should do. But consciousness is more like I will become more aware of who and what I am, and then many other things follow.
Well, and I think there's a
But it doesn't
distinction
quite.
between, well, I think there's a distinction. I think where you're headed is consciousness as versus consciousness.
Put that in other words, because that doesn't resonate to me yet.
So the first is being aware of the world and what's happening, and it's the awareness part, whereas consciousness is the thought part.
Well, that's interesting. See, you went in an entirely different direction than I would go. To my mind, consciousness is not about the world, it's about yourself. It's about clearing that
Can be,
space
yeah.
in yourself so that it's not full of robots and full of, vagueness. And then, yes, you're going to be aware of the world as well. And probably I've never been aware enough of the world. But I think many people are not aware enough of themselves.
Well, I think you can also have it be that it can be consciousness, can be outward oriented, seeing everything. And it's more than seeing, it's taking it in and having it be a part of you. But then there's also, as you say, the inward looking part of being aware of your own self.
Yes, but if they're the same thing, maybe we shouldn't be splitting that out. I almost want to say something like connectivity, although that's not really, it's not right. You see
Maybe
what
we
I'm
just
going
don't have a
with?
word for it.
Maybe we should invent the word for it. Maybe that's what we're up to. Because
Huh.
it is, how do you take consciousness and make it into a verb? Although none of these others are verbs actually. But I'm looking at increase of consciousness, I guess, or living as consciously as we can. You're cheating.
But
You're looking
notice the
something up on
distinction
the
between
computer.
those. The first one, you can go to, how do I think? The second one is about awareness in the world.
Again, we're so different. You saying think, I'm thinking perceive. And there's a
Well, no,
big difference.
and that's the distinction I'm making. For me, consciousness is this idea about how a mind works, how it processes thought, and that sort of thing.
I understand what you're saying. I'm trying to process this myself. Well, it's an interesting distinction, and they're both required, of course. They're probably both the same thing, but they don't
I have an
sound the same
idea.
thing when you talk about them. Hmm?
And I have an idea. How about we ask your guys?
Who'd have thunk? All right, and what are we asking them? How to think about this?
Well, first one about the quandary we just had about conscious and consciousness. And then the
Okay,
second larger one is your original thing of asking them in general about the virtues and the vices and the sins, etc.
okay. We might, if you don't mind, take a note or two on this one. Like, I have a feeling it's going to be something important. I may be wrong, of course. The sense that I'm getting is they're saying consciousness and awareness are two linked but different pointing processes. Consciousness refers to itself. Awareness refers outward. Awareness of. You're not so much conscious of as you're conscious. But whereas the other thing is you're aware of this and such. Now, what would be confusing about this is either of these can be aimed inward or outward. Ideally, they would be aimed both ways so that you would see the connections. But in order to better understand what it is you're saying, you need to make and keep in mind a distinction between awareness and consciousness. And it almost makes less difference what you make as the fact that you make the distinction. So that if let's say you decide awareness means I will be aware of my own mental processes, and I will be aware of the outside world, and I will be aware of how the outside world and my own mental processes interact. That would all be under awareness. Consciousness might be,
Sure.
I am aware that I am in the world, in both the 3D and the non-3D, and I am aware that I have internal processes that I can influence and steer. that my effective mental space is partly free and partly cluttered up with robots or other mechanical or mechanized processes. Start with that. Start with the difference between awareness being back and forth, consciousness being aware of itself. And just parenthetically, this would tie in with some people's religious views. You may have heard that some people, we start to say fantasize, some people theorize that God wanted to become more aware of God and so split off a part of God so that the God could be aware of other parts of God. It can be made to sound ridiculous. It isn't actually a ridiculous speculation, but that all applies to awareness. It is aware of anything that you can relate to as other, whereas consciousness is anything that you don't relate to any of it as other, but this is also a part of me. That's actually a better distinction. Took us a while to get there, but between awareness and consciousness. Go ahead.
And I think that comes out of the notebooks of Lazarus Long with Arthur Clarke, and the idea that, and God was lonely, and so he split himself into myriad bits that he might have friends.
Well, Clarke may have said that, but it's in many religious traditions over the centuries.
It is.
Now, the other thing you wanted us to discuss was sin in general, the entire overarching theme.
Yes, please.
You have to start from the beginning, and the beginning is you're put into a restricted 3D environment for the purpose of choosing. If that is your purpose, there can be nobody outside of yourself with the right to tell you, you should choose this and not that. The whole idea is for you to choose. That means the values that you hold and the values that your friend across the street hold may be radically different. And if both of you are living your values, there's nothing wrong with it. And if both of you are living your values inconsistently, it's the inconsistency that's the problem, not the nature of the values. Having said that, though, you could say that from our view, your indicated best outcome would be wholeness, and that the sins are 7 particular avenues from which you can divert yourself from wholeness without realizing what you're doing, or realizing it and perversely choosing it. So that, for instance, pride is considered a sin. Well, it's considered a sin if it means I, as the 3D level, ego level, am the only thing that counts, and I'm going to disregard anything above me, and I'm going to disregard anybody else's rights. Well, certainly that's a sin. But if pride means I have my pride, I will live my best, I will live so that I can be proud of myself, that's certainly not a sin. Same word, very different realities. And the difference is the one is a slide and the other is a decision. Nobody ever decided their way into sin. That's a little too strong a statement, but it's close. Whereas nobody ever slid into virtue is even more true. All right. So take lust.
And I ask you to expand those ideas, considering impact on others and impact on self.
Well, yes, that's good. We always look at these things as impact on self first, because that's your real primary job. But you cannot do something that injures somebody else without injuring you plus them. Everything is connected. You're all one. You are not going to get away scot-free just because the courts gave you a not guilty, and just because nobody ever knew about it. It is going to be, and then we're not talking about simple things like there will be justice, something will catch up with you, or you're going to go to hell afterwards. We're saying your decisions choose you, and bad decisions like that shape what you are, and you will either have to overcome them or you'll have to live with them. Now, in terms of the other person, remember, well, this will sound cold, but it's true. Everybody is the center of their own universe. They have their own problems and their own solutions, but nothing happens to them by accident any more than it happens to you by accident. It can appear like that, but it can't be. It just can't be. So In practical terms, this is probably why we've never approached it the way you were approaching it. In practical terms, the only person you can really affect is yourself. You can injure another person. You can cause them trauma, which causes them problems down the path. And we don't mean to lessen that, but how do we say this? You can't give someone there are different ways to say it, and they're all a little bit wrong. You could say you can't give someone more than they can handle, or something that they don't, that isn't in their path. None of those are quite right. You can say, no, actually, it's really a complicated situation, more than we want to go into at the moment. Let's leave it at this. You know what the results are on yourself. Concentrate on that, because that's what you can do it with. It is true you can damage another person. It isn't exactly true that you can damage them at random from their point of view, or unwantedly from their point of view, but it will often look like that. We know we're sort of bailing out on half of your question, but that second question.
That's okay.
Well, it's a complex question. It would take a whole session, and perhaps we should look at it. If you wish, we'll do that at another time. But it's peripheral to the main thing here. You see the effect.
The sense of it I get is that it's context dependent, and that there are many paths that are involved. And it has to do with a network of interactions between self and other, and time from now to future and into the past as well.
Well, not only that, but all the variants, because all the variants also take place, even though they don't seem to. The one you're on seems to be the real one, but as you yourself have experienced, it isn't the only real one. And once in a while, you realize that. So yes, all of that, past life connections, other. By the way, we don't think we've ever said this. Bearing unmerited suffering is also a contribution. You know, and that can be some people's contribution to the greater good. You might not think that, but if someone gets, I don't know, a drive-by shooting and they wind up paralyzed and they have to spend the rest of their life in a wheelchair, wasn't their fault. They're not being punished for something, although they might be. You know, you really can't tell. But nothing can happen that isn't paid one way or the other. You know, the person who did the shooting is going to pay. The person who is in the wheelchair is going to be paid. It's not a straight one-to-one. It isn't like the shooter is going to repay the other one. It isn't like the one's going to hell and the other one's going to heaven or any of those things. But it is true that everything being connected it's too obvious to say. Everything being connected means everything's connected. There can't be loose ends. There can't be at random. It's the only word we can think of. Are we squared away on that one?
I think so. And I can see much more to it than even that, but I'm thinking it's maybe best that we may want to end this topic for the moment and then resume it with a little more clarity about where we want to go.
That's fine. Whenever you get those silent objections, write them down, because that'll probably be a good topic for another time. And yes, we're about halfway through. I mean, we're about through the half hour. Well, I think that I don't know. It seemed like we might made a good start on this anyway.
I think we've made a good start, and now we need to think a little bit about which way we're going to go from here, because I can see several.
Well, I'm counting on the differences between us. You not having a religious background and my having a religious background, and both of us not being where we started, but being still different. And that difference is what can be productive.
Well, and where your guys went is very much where I live. And so I was very interested to hear their take on that. Not exactly the same, but pretty close. And it's one that has left me befuddled for a good deal of my life in many different directions.
Can you give me a specific? What are we talking about? I know.
Well, where they're talking about that when an individual does something that ends up whether it's classified sin or otherwise, when they do things that are what we would assess as harmful,
Yeah.
that irrespective of whether or not within our societal structures they are punished for it, they will internally be punished for it by their own self's response to what has happened.
No, I can hear them going, not punished.
Nope.
No.
I know it's the wrong word. The language fails.
It's very misleading. You don't mean punished, but you do mean that actions have consequences, and you will not
Correct.
escape consequences. And we can
Correct.
talk about that at another time if you wish to.
And that may manifest as internal suffering. It may be self-destructive. There are all kinds of things that may happen out of that.
Now, the Hindus, I think it is, would say that they're going to be reborn in another life and they're going to be punished for what happens before. But again, punishment is too simple and is too simple-minded almost, really, because we're much more complicated.
Right.
All right. Well, let's resume this again.
All right, we'll call it a good, and we'll be back in a bit here to see where do we go next. All right. Take care.
See you.
If you enjoyed this episode, please press like. Please press subscribe to stay informed of new episodes as they appear. We would love to hear from you in the comments section below, and we wish you the very best in connecting with your own guidance.